All right, guys, welcome to my show, Supply in the Mind. I've got two amazing guests, Matt Marvel, my G, and I've got, would you like to introduce yourself?
Laurena.
Okay, so today's topic we're going to talk about, I don't really want to make it too regimented, but we're going to talk about, Christianity. And the reason why I want to talk about Christianity and religion and the existence of God is because I've come from a place where I was a religious person. I was a Christian for 11 years. And I want to, kind of just bounce around each other. So, what do you guys think about the concept of God's existence? Do you think there's a God? There's not a God? What do you think about religion and specifically Christianity? What do you think about it?
So, as a Christian, I believe there's a God. I believe that there's a creator of the universe and an intelligent designer who made man in his image and in his grace gave us the Saviour Christ in light of the fact that we will fall short and we sin. And so, yes, there's a God, yeah.
Okay, let me ask this question. What's the basis for why you believe in Jesus Christ specifically? Because there's so many different religions and religions that existed before Jesus, like thousands of years gone back. Hinduism is the oldest religion that we know of in our current civilization. There's so many ancient Near Eastern religions that existed at the time prior. So out of all the different religions, why Christianity for you?
I think it's the only one that speaks of a necessity for a saviour. I think when it comes to a lot of other religions, there's a worldview that's, or not a worldview, but there is a sentiment that's often projected about us being good by nature, and in being good by nature, sort of deserving certain things or deserving a relationship with God or deserving particularities in a way that doesn't reflect how we are.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. And I appreciate that especially because, I used to be a guy that was, me, we know each other before this anyway, because I visited your church many times, and we have like a close relationship. So like, that's why I appreciate you as a friend, because like, even though I'm no longer Christian, unlike many other Christians who kind of just shunned me away and said, you know what, F off, you're no longer one of us, you didn't do that. So that's why, like, we've had this conversation already. Do you know what I'm saying? So this is nothing new for us, but Matt, what do you think as well?
It's new for me, bro.
Yeah, it's new. So I'm gonna bring you involved. You get me, Maggie? What do you think about? Do you think there's a God?
I think like your first initial Christian question was quite interesting, because you talked about creator, then you create religion, then you talked about religion, which are two separate things. I definitely believe there's a creator, 100%. What that creator looks like and how that creator behaves is yet to be discovered. But there are too many particular things in this world to say there is not a creator. It's intelligent design, as you put it.
Give an example. Like, I want an example. Devil's advocate, because I actually agree.
In our solar system, we are the only planet that has oxygen, and we're the only one that sustains life, and all the life on our planet uses oxygen, uses nitrogen, carbon dioxide, and it's all designed. And if you go one planet further, go to Mars, there's nothing there.
But didn't they say recently that there's apparently water that they've discovered, water supply that they've discovered? I don't know personally. I've never been to Mars,
but just looking at right now on our planet, there's look how nature is intricately designed. These things can't happen by accident.
Yeah.
And if it was happening by accident, we'll see evidence of all these accidents happening everywhere else, and the accidents of not working. But it just so happens on this planet we see accidents. Actually, we don't see no accidents. We see things and they all work perfectly.
Yeah.
So would you say that you believe there's a creator that's of the universe, but the Christians or other religious people on this earth only sort of reflect a religion about here as opposed to the universe?
No, so first of all, that's the nature of human beings. We project. We obviously innately probably think there is a creator of the universe, and then we project Poseidon, we project Aries, we project all these like project all these other religions, Hinduism, Sikh. We can project all these things, thinking it's something to do with a creator, which it probably does. But I know there's a creator because things don't happen by accident, and people's lives and destinies are all tied into one thing. Fate, karma, all those things are tied into. Like one has to be tied into one thing. But in terms of a religion with one truth, I think no religion has a monopoly on the truth.
I agree with that. I actually agree. Yeah. And I think personally, it's crazy because I was a Christian for 11 years. Prior to that, I was a Muslim briefly when I was 17. I went through a period where I was a Muslim, but it was more, I'll say, Nation of Islam influence.
Okay.
And then I got into like Orthodox Islam. But then after that, I quickly left because I felt like there was no real relationship I have with God, you know, through practicing Islam. And I got no disrespect to any religion, but my perspective now about religion is that I think a lot of religions, first of all, are man-made, man-constructed, because it's all stories that derive from what human beings believe the world should be like and what they think about who the creator of the world is. And I think for me, at that time, I was kind of looking for a answer for why I'm here, kind of like a purpose given guide to life. And I became Christian when I was 18 years old. And for 11 years, I was proper dogmatic, proper on this thing. Man went to America, you get me, to study. I went college out there to play basketball, but also I went to a Bible college, studied Greek and Hebrew, studied New Testament, Old Testament, studied theology. Oh, wow. Yeah, so I was proper. I wanted to become a professor.
You was very much.
Yeah, man was a nerd.
You was deep in this game.
I don't look like it, but man's a nerd, you know. You get my thing. Yeah, man's a bad boy nerd. You get.
He was very deep into the game.
Yeah, I was proper deep, and I was deep because I was so passionate, and I believed this was true, and it was because of an experience that I articulated to be real. Whereas in hindsight now, I look at it as just purely psychological. And I think
Talk
that's
about that. Like,
as in,
like, what do you mean?
Your experience as a Christian for 11 years was psychological.
I think naturally there's a psychological need. I think the reason why you look at ancient cultures, indigenous cultures like the Mayans, you look at Near Eastern cultures like Amorites, Canaanites, the Jews, Israelite people. At that time, there was a pressing need to make sense of the chaos going on in the world. And that's why a lot of the things, there's a lot of what they believed about the world scientifically, we now know is nonsense. Even when you talk about cosmology, like my favorite philosopher is Aristotle. But Aristotle believed that literally that the earth was the center of the universe. And it's because of his concept of cosmology. Whereas now, through scientific discovery, we've come to learn accurate things about our reality. And I'm not saying that there isn't, I actually believe there's a higher power. But the reason why I no longer believe in the Bible is because of my friend Mickey. Mickey's a guy who's, shout out my G. Mickey's one of my closest friends, and I've known him since 2011. We met evangelizing in Leicester Square. With Mickey, he got to a point where he started doubting, just as around the lockdown, COVID. And he started to have doubts. We both had doubts, but his one were more extreme. And he come to me one day and said, Fems, bro, I ain't gonna lie to you, man. The Bible ain't what you think it is, you know. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, and at that point, I just come out of depression. I just come out of going through a lot myself. So I just done therapy. So for me, leaving Jesus was the last thing I wanted to do. I wanted to hold on to that with my day life. But Mickey was like, bro, there's so many contradictions in the Bible. There's false prophecies. There's, you know, so many different discrepancies that make it an illegitimate document to trust as the sole guide for humanity. And, you know, when I actually put off that conversation with Mickey for like about 2 months because I was subconsciously scared of him being true, because I know Mickey, we were very alike, but he said to me one time, look, I just know, bro, that you're trying to ditch this conversation, you're trying to ditch, man, you get me, I know you're avoiding this, but bro, I respect you as a guy that is a truthist. You're someone who, irrespective of how you feel about something, I know you're like me, bro. Like, if it's true, you're gonna go where the truth is. And that's why I was like, you know what? He's right. And that's true. Like, if I believe this Bible, 66 books written by 40 different authors, is inspired by God, then I might as well test the claims, because I believe that there's an answer somewhere. And when I sat down with Mickey, we spoke for about 6 hours in his car, just chilling, chatting, and then he was showing me so many things in the Bible, and I was like, bro, like, cognitive dissonance. Inside my heart, I was like, bro, this don't make sense, man. No, inside my mind, I was like, bro, this don't make sense anymore. But in my heart, I'll still attach to it. So I want to hear what you think about that.
I've gone through a similar experience, presented with truth, especially when it comes to just an idea of history that I wasn't privy to. Very much similarly spent a lot of years in the faith at church, and then was presented with a lot of facts and a new understanding and perception about the Bible and about Christianity. A lot of it sort of reflecting how things were back in the day, when the early assembly was. I think my sort of turning back to Christ after literally going through an experience similar was very, very experiential, but also again quite sort of not just reflective, but as much as you can have all of the facts in the world and knowledge and be presented and see inconsistency, some of which I still can't rectify myself, even with logic that has been logic is logic, and yet the idea of God and the idea of creator means that yes, he's logical, but he's also spirit, right? And he's out of this realm. And so when it comes to Christianity, I was no longer able to just take a purely logical view, right? It had to also reflect an experience, which brought me back into the faith.
Okay, now I just want to touch on that point you said, because I hear what you're saying. And that's how I used to think as a Christian, that God is beyond logic. Like knowing God in a true way, in a true spiritual way, that's reflective of your experience, has to transcend logic. But for me, if God is the basis of logic, he's the creator of everything, including reasoning, we exist in a way where we can only know things by our reason. We don't start by experience. Our logic precedes everything. It's the main faculty we use to make decisions about life. So for me, it was like, okay, if God has created mathematics, I believe he's created everything in the universe, the God of the Bible, Yahweh, he's created everything. Why is it that there are contradictions in the Bible? So for example, I'll just give, so when I spoke to Mickey, my boy, he said, let's talk about the prophecy of Tyre in chapter 26 to chapter 28, 3 chapters. Ezekiel basically talks about how there's an indictment and judgment against Tyre, which is now known as modern day Lebanon. And in this passage, Ezekiel is basically saying that God is going to completely, utterly destroy Tyre, wipe them out through the king Nebuchadnezzar, who was a king of Babylon. I forget which time period this was. I don't want to get it wrong. But essentially, the Tyrians were going to be so wiped out, it was going to be like another Sodom and Gomorrah. There was not going to be anyone who inhabits that land ever again. They'll never remain, and even if they're found or sought for, they'll never be found. And it's 3 chapters of just God just saying, "You man are done up. You're finished." So you get to Ezekiel gives dates that scholars have calculated and recognized, and there's about 15-year gap between chapter 28 and chapter 29 or 30, where Ezekiel actually admits inadvertently that the prophecy failed, and says actually Nebuchadnezzar didn't wipe out and destroy Tyre. And in this passage, what's ironic is we got non-biblical writings from guys like Herodotus I, who says that he's a Greek historian from that time. This is that Nebuchadnezzar actually tried to attempt to lay siege, but he was highly unsuccessful. And now you look at Lebanon. You look at Lebanon today. That's what Tyre is. It didn't happen. So I said to Mickey, okay, maybe it didn't mean what you thought it meant. But he goes, well, you can't have your cake and eat it. What about Egypt? Because what he does in chapter 30, Ezekiel goes on to say, because he didn't get his wages, and this is Ezekiel admitting that the prophecy failed. So he goes, because it didn't happen, God is now going to give Egypt into Nebuchadnezzar's hands. He's going to go there. He's going to completely kill people there. He's going to wipe out all the idols. He's going to take the slain, and they're going to be hanging there. He talks about how there's going to be a desolation for 40 years, so not a foot will step in Egypt. And he talks about so many things. The Nile will dry up. And of course, the Nile drying up is a very, very catastrophic thing because it's 90% of Egypt's water supply. It's also, it runs through 11 countries. So if that happened, that would be a very miraculous thing. And for it to be filled up again would be also very mad. So the fact that we know Egypt's history from that time period, from non-biblical sources, who actually say Egypt was one of the most prosperous civilizations. We know that, we know the pharaohs and kings who were ruling at the time. That made me think, okay, how should I then look at the Bible then? Because this is a prophecy that clearly failed. And there's other examples, like there's a contradiction in Samuel, 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel about David killing Goliath. 1 Samuel, I can't get a reference, but anyone who wants it, DM me, supply it in the mind, Instagram, man will get back to you. But my boy Mickey actually wrote a document of all of our arguments in a much more comprehensive and concise format. But 1 Samuel, there's a chapter where it says that it was David who killed Goliath. But in 2 Samuel, talking about the same account, it says that Elkanah killed Goliath. And in the English translations, the KJV and specifically the NKJV, they put inscription, so like footnotes, and they put it in red markings saying the brother of. And that basically, whenever you see that, like an inscription in any of your English translations, it basically means that it doesn't reflect the original manuscripts of what it said. So really and truly, they're telling you they put the brother of to make sense of the contradiction. And there's so many other vast examples of contradictions. So would you say to that?
Elkanah in 2 Samuel.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not something I can't remember. I think when it comes to trying to apply logic, that is fair, right? If there's inconsistencies, there's inconsistencies. I feel like there is answers that are clear that I'm not in a position to answer, just because right now my reconstruction of faith is quite babe-like.
I respect that.
It's interesting when it comes to sort of stories of the Bible and the inconsistencies, whether it's from genealogies to things from two different chapters that appear clearly inconsistent. I think there are apologists who are able to answer or try to answer. I think there are definitely things that are hard to reconcile with when it comes to the Bible, of which I'm not someone who is at any depth to be able to.
Neither am I. I'm not a scholar. I don't have a PhD.
At the same time, I get that if you're presented with it and you're looking at it from a purely logical view, it can definitely put you off. And if you were to study into it and still not feel satisfied with the answers, you can still be put off. I was actually I'm still on a journey of trying to piece together some of the things that I still have questions of.
What are the questions that you have?
I wanted to take a year out to just go back to basics, right? Just the understanding of the importance of context, the understanding of the Bible being a picture of redemptive history, all pointing to Christ, but also having very unique stories and genres worth looking into. A lot of that would have probably allowed for a lot of answers to questions that you're bringing up.
Or shall I ask you? Because we probably would have, I don't know. I was going to make a joke there, but it's too inappropriate for the
or
camera.
Not.
Matt knows me. I'm crazy.
Or not. I can't speak from a sort of perspective of intellectually being able to persuade by... Intellectually being able to persuade by having the equations fit.
Matt, what do you... I want you to let you touch on this.
But I think a lot of Femi's position is him trying to put faith and logic into a man-made Bible, which is part of... When you look at when the Bible was made and everything's gone through to this day, you're reading a book where if people didn't like what it read, they would change it. If people didn't understand it, they'll change it. So a lot of your issues necessarily is not with God, it's with how it's presented by people who don't have the best intentions.
Yeah,
and who are fallen.
Because
people are fallen.
Yeah.
Because let's think of you always have to look. How I look at it is I look at the Bible in the context of colonization. The Bible was created and it was used to colonize every part of the world. So the biggest one to look at is Philippines. Philippines, the Catholic Church is the richest. The Catholic Church is rich in the Philippines, but the Philippine country is so poor. They speak Spanish.
That's fucking deep.
They speak Spanish. They speak Spanish. Colonization. We in Africa, Nigeria, English. Colonization.
I agree with that.
Christianity.
I agree.
Same like Islam as well. Colonization.
The Arabs
as well.
In the Byzantine era.
All colonization.
Yeah.
So if we can't put faith in a book like that. So that's why I've literally in my life I've kind of like discarded the Bible. I know it has good stuff, it has bad stuff.
Yeah.
It might tell the truth, it might not tell the truth.
And I definitely think
and
that
I'm not putting no stock in it. I'm not putting the stock in it as a whole, but there are certain things that it has taught me that I will take with it. But I'm not trying to apply logic to it because it's just a book. It's just I would literally can call it a non-fiction book. And I'm fine with that because it still can teach me great lessons.
Yeah, and I think for me, I agree with Matt because I think the Bible presents itself as the 66 books. Each book is meant to be a reflection of Yahweh's word. All the prophets or the writers of the Bible, 40 different authors, over 150 years of them living in multiple locations, different cultural contexts, and they are all meant to be building upon this revelation that's meant to be a unified story and a monolithic story, which means that it's like one story from Genesis to Revelation, and it's just building on each other, pointing to this redemptive history that you're talking about. And you're only saying, well, not you personally, but Christians only say that because you're reading the Old Testament in light of the New Testament, which is a hermeneutical method. But a Muslim now that reads the New Testament, Old Testament, like the Quran says those scriptures previously were given by the same God as the Quran, but they've become misguided and they've become corrupted because the followers have messed it up, and that's why Allah had to send the Quran. So when the Muslim guy reads the Old Testament and New Testament in light of the Quran, why is that a problem? But the Christian can read the Old Testament like the New Testament, and I say that because Jews disagree that Jesus is the Messiah. So the reason why I no longer believe that the Bible is true is because I think there's false prophecies. Tyre is one of the examples I gave, and I think there's contradictions. The example I gave with David and the brother, one account says it's David, another account says a completely different name. But then you look at there's more. Some might look at that example like that's a very minor contradiction. There's mathematical contradictions like King Ahaziah, the king of Israel. Second Chronicles, I believe, says. I need to get the exact reference, but you guys can Google it. One account says that King Ahaziah, king of Israel, became king at 22 years old. I think it's Second Kings that says that he became king at 42. Now, some might say, well, that's just a mathematical error, man. But it's the implication of the fact that you're saying that this is the guide for humanity and that the God of this book is guiding us for purity of truth. But if he's giving us logic and we're able to decipher what's right and wrong and what's erroneous, then how can God allow his book to contain such simple errors and expect us to not be able to decipher with our logic that he's created what is coherent and what is not with other books that are mythical? Especially when you think about other contradictions, like, for example, more significant ones, like the birth of Jesus. For me, the biggest problem was I saw, the New Testament writers, like Matthew and Luke, for example, contradict each other on so many things. Like Matthew, for example, on the birth of Jesus, Matthew says that Jesus was born in 4 BC because he says this was during the days of Herod. We know that Herod died in 4 BC. So Jesus' birth, according to Matthew, has to be sometime before. But Luke, while in chapter 1 of his account, Luke actually admits he's not an eyewitness. He says, man got my thing from, get me? He got his thing from the original people that were the followers. So he's a second. So that's another thing. The 4 gospel writers are not even eyewitnesses because they're all writing third person. None of them are writing as people who actually witnessed the resurrection. It was the women that witnessed the resurrection, and they all contradict significantly on the details. To the point where in Matthew 28:19, Jesus says, "Tell the disciples to meet me in Galilee in his post-resurrection." But in Luke's account, Jesus tells them not to depart from Jerusalem, and in Acts, because Acts is the same author. But Galilee's 80 miles north outside of Jerusalem. So it's like the first time Jesus saw the disciples, was it in Galilee or was it in Jerusalem? Because he couldn't have said both. And then with the birth of Jesus, Matthew has Jesus being born in the time of Herod. And he tells the angel Gabriel appears to Joseph, tells Joseph, go to Egypt when Jesus is born, take Mary and Jesus there to protect them because Herod's trying to kill the innocents. But then Luke's account is much different. Luke has Jesus being born during the days of Quirinius, while he was governor of Syria under the census. And we know historically when that happened in 6 AD. So that's 10 years, that's a 10-year discrepancy between Matthew and Luke on just the narrative of Jesus' birth. So from a historical perspective, if they contradict each other, they can't be historically valid. So if they're historically invalid, then how can this, if an account about the God of the world who became incarnate is based on sources that are historically flawed and contradictory, then for me it's like, well, how can I take it seriously when there's so many other religions that contradict each other in other ways? And when you think about like Luke's account, Luke actually then says that when Jesus is born, before he was born, the angel appears to Mary, not Joseph, and tells Mary to dedicate the child. And when Jesus is born, he dedicates the child. They go to Jerusalem. It's a much more peaceful account. There's no threat of Herod because obviously he was dead 10 years before. And when he's born, they dedicate him according to the law of Leviticus. I think it's Leviticus 12, where they dedicate the child for 40 days. And then after that, they go to Nazareth because that's where they're from. Whereas in Matthew's account, they go to Nazareth because they're scared of Herod. So for me, it's like, this is a very, very crucial thing, because you're talking about me being 2,000 years removed from the events and the life of Jesus, and the sources based upon his life are based on sources that are witnesses who say they saw this. But I'm 2,000 years removed, so how can I be verified and sure that what these men are saying that they saw? Because if I apply that line of reasoning to any other scenario in our modern day, you would say I'm crazy. Why are you going to believe someone saw a unicorn because they said they saw a unicorn? Sorry for rambling, but I just got to be real. You get me? Man's real. You get me? Man's got to be honest. This is how I feel.
I think I went through a phase of trying to rectify the discrepancies as far as eyewitnesses, right? Mm-hmm. I remember at the time, I think the conclusion I came from the readings was just the understanding of man, right? And how one person will exaggerate the truth or a particular event, or one person will sort of not say something. And so during the time of me studying, that's kind of how I reconciled a lot of the differences within the gospel writings. I think when it comes to logic, yes, God is definitely a God of intellect, and yet the Bible speaks about the Holy Spirit, right? He says in scripture, what's it? In the last days, not in the last days, there will be a time when people
I think that's Joel chapter 4.
Worship me in spirit and in truth, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there's a reality that whilst there's logic that a person should approach the Bible with, and unfortunately sometimes we are not met with the answers that we want based on objective discrepancies, there are people who have been able to sort of present an argument that sort of pacifies people. And yet I'm still thinking very much that the Bible and Christianity is not purely logic, because we are told that there's a Holy Spirit that will come to sort of give us special revelation, right? And not just based purely upon what 1 and 1 equals 2.
Yeah.
And so...
And you're a mathematician. So you can see why I find these things problematic.
I am a mathematician.
Because I think if God is the creator of maths, why do you have false... So I don't... This is not a dig at you personally, because we've spoken about this already, but from my perspective, the reason why I want to take this time to really explain, because I've got a lot of Christian friends who, when I left the church, they were like, oh my gosh, you just want to justify your sin. You just want to F bare girls, or you want to go partying and raving and smoke. You want to do all these mad things. But I was like, listen, none of those things, since I've left the church, satisfy me. I do what I do because of what I believe is true and realistic, or reflective of reality. And I don't do things to please people. I do what I think. I don't care about what people think. So for me, I'm gonna go with what I believe. You get what my team think is. You get me? So, for example, like I told people, listen, my reasons are purely intellectual. I don't believe in the Bible anymore, not because I want to have fun or mess around in the world. The world is empty. It's depressing. People are talking about LGBT to a mad thing where they're putting all these agendas, and they're making all of us Like the system's mad. You get me? The society, Western society is crazy. You know, they like there's nothing in the world that makes me feel more like, do you know what I'm saying?
Emptier.
Like, yeah. So my reasons are purely intellectual. Like the reason why I don't believe in the Bible is because I think there are false prophecies, like the Tyre one. There's other examples as well. I think Matthew 24 is another example where Jesus talks about his second coming in the lifetime of his generation. Because in Matthew 24, Jesus says these things are going to happen. He's talking about the second coming, his return, and judging the wicked from the wise. He says this is going to happen during the lifetime of his generation, because he says some of you are standing here who will not taste death until these things happen. In one account, I think Mark says that. Another account says this generation will not pass away until all these things that the Son of Man has spoken about will come to pass. So Jesus clearly believed that his second coming was going to be within the lifetime of his generation. And that's what's reflected by what Paul says, that don't get married. There's no point, because I know you're going to get married in a couple of weeks. So, but you read in 1 Corinthians, Paul says there's no point in the first century because
of the persecution.
Behold, he's coming soon. James says the same thing. But then you look at other things like the genealogies, there's contradictions there. And for me, the biggest thing is the resurrection. That the criteria for the resurrection is based on anecdotal evidence, what hearsay evidence, what people say they saw. So for me, it's like, if I don't believe that anymore, what do I believe? I believe that there's something, and I believe in me. I believe in my experience, because I'm a rational thinking person who interprets my reality through my experience, and everyone does the same. So if we all do that, who's right and wrong? Because unless there's something objective outside of our experience that tells us that we're all fucking wrong, in my opinion, it's like, I think life is about finding yourself, your own journey. And I do believe there's a God, but I don't think it's the Abrahamic God. And I want to hear what you think about that. And I want to hear, actually, let me say, Matt, what do you think about that? Because I want to give you a chance to, you know what I'm saying?
I haven't read enough to know anything. My opinion.
You're smarter than me, mate.
Very honest.
My opinion is
you're both smarter than me. You're both smarter than me.
But I can just observe by what you said and what you didn't say. And it's interesting to me that you want the Bible to be this cohesive historical document. Because you want it to be. You want it to be.
I think reality mandates it because of the implications of logically saying that God is the God of this book, is the creator of everything that exists and that we're aware of, including logic. And I think it's a feasible thing as a human being. The only way you can test a claim of anything is by logic. I don't think you can do it outside of that. That's why I say that.
Okay.
What do you think about that?
Okay.
You look like you disagree. And I love disagreements.
Okay, alright. So now
you said the only way you can test the claim is purely by logic.
A claim that is a claim that is a logical claim, because what people do, or religious people, is they want to separate, they want to create a dichotomy between their religious experience and philosophy. But you can't believe something is true without reason. Because for it to be true, it has to be reasonable.
Okay, so let me just play devil's advocate.
Okay, yeah, dude, let's do this.
Okay, let's just say out of all the knowledge in the world, in the universe, what's the percentage of what human beings know?
Well, it depends which you mean. Well, of course, it's very obscure because
of all the human knowledge ever existed.
Below 50%. I don't know.
Below 50%.
I don't know because we don't. There's so much we don't know.
There's so much we don't know. So just to say, like, what percentage would you give it? I would say we have about 15% of the knowledge in the world.
Yeah.
I would say about that.
Okay.
Now, if we're gonna go by logic, what are the odds of God and religion and understanding faith and all those things being in existence are outside that 15%? That's 85% of chance. So therefore, if we're going by that, we have 85% of it being true because it's outside of our scope of knowledge.
But if you're relying on a criteria that is similar to the criteria of the atheist, so logic, because let me give you an example that's gonna make sense of your question, is that religious people, the Muslim, the Jew, the Christian, because the Jewish person disagrees with her, and all Christians, that Jesus is not the Messiah. So when I take the Bible, for example, and I compare the scriptures of the New Testament to what the Old Testament Jewish people believed about the Messiah is completely contradictory. Because that's part of why I don't believe in Jesus anymore, is that there's so many, like, for example, let's take Isaiah 7, for example. That's a passage that everyone loves. He shall be called Emmanuel. Well, Jesus never called Emmanuel in the New Testament, but that's another problem. The thing I have is that it's talking about this child, it's going to be born of a virgin, etc. The first thing is, the term used for virgin in that passage that Matthew and Luke, again, it's Matthew and Luke because they contradict each other a lot. The term Alma, that's the name for virgin, right? No, well, it's actually Bethsula. But Alma is a term they use. The term Alma means young woman, doesn't mean virgin. And in the original context of Isaiah 7, it's talking about a king who dreads two kings who are fighting over each other, basically. That's the context of Isaiah 7. Isaiah 7 is talking about a guy, Ahaz, whose land was... He dreaded a land which had two kings fighting against each other. And the child that was spoken of in that passage was a child that was going to be born in that period, because the sign of the birth of that child was representative of what was going to happen to the two kings and the land that the Ahaz dreaded. Essentially, it says specifically in Isaiah 7 that the child, before it knows to choose good or evil, so it has the capacity to do evil or, that's when the signs and revelation of that passage will happen, where the kings will fight and etc., and there will be judgment upon the land. So when you look at that, so and in chapter 8, it actually explains who the two kings are, Rezin and someone else, I forgot the name. But then it actually also, the birth of the child happens in chapter 8 of Isaiah. So Matthew and Luke basically read the Greek translation of the Old Testament, the Septuagint, and they run off of that, and so in other words, the term for, so what I'm basically trying to say is this: the term for virgin is used so many times in the Old Testament in the Hebrew, except for Isaiah 7. But Matthew and Luke interpret the Hebrew in light of the Greek translation, and they basically they basically misunderstand the terminology of the term virgin, and that's why they believe
because
that Jesus
they're
was
not
born of a
seeing it
virgin.
from a Hebrew perspective.
Hebrew perspective, but also the original writers of the Old Testament were Hebrew. It was written in Hebrew, not Greek. Greek is a later thing. So basically, they only believe in the virgin birth because of their misunderstanding of the translation of the meaning of the word Alma. It's never ever used for young virgin in the original Hebrew in Isaiah 7, but it's used everywhere else in the Old Testament. So why should I? And this is the same thing. The Christian will look at a Muslim and say, you can't interpret the scriptures of the Bible in light of Muhammad being a prophet of the Bible. And that's like, for example, Songs of Solomon. You know, it says Muhammadim, and I've debated so many Muslims on this, man. When I used to be a Christian in Speaker's Corner, man was there with Mickey. Shout out Mickey again. We were there in the trenches debating these Muslim man. There were 20 of them. I've been there by myself. 20 of Muslim man, and they're telling me Jesus is not God, all these things. In 2011, I was telling these man, bro, this is what the scriptures say. One of them said to me, bro, Muhammad's prophesied in the Bible. I said, show me the prophecy. He showed me Songs of Solomon chapter 5. In that passage, it's not even a prophecy, let alone about Muhammad. But that's what Christians do. They take Old Testament passages and they make about Jesus. So what I'm saying is, the way I'm using the logic to refute the Bible, it's not in a way where I'm trying to purposely find faults. It's me just naturally using what my faculty uses. How my faculty of reason is that way, because that's how I survive. It's how we all survive as humans. We make sense of what is around us, and we test things. And you can only test things on things that can only be tested on a criteria that we will use, which is logic. And
Not alone,
but experience is subjective.
I think there's a lot of coherency, and yet there are, stuff that are hard to explain. I think when it comes to God, you expect obviously he's intelligent and we are his intelligent beings, and yet the Bible says secret things belong to God. And so I understand the idea of coming to the Bible from a purely logical view and being disappointed. And yet if God is who he says he is, and if he is other, right, and separate, then there's going to be things that we can't package and make sense of.
You're a mathematician, so I have a burning question to ask you.
I teach maths, yeah.
Teach maths. This is even better.
I'm not gonna lie, I think that's.
I feel like when it comes
I'm not gonna lie, I think
to
that's
the
sexy.
idea of
Can I just say, I think that's sexy, you teach maths.
This is
sorry.
a perfect.
I'm not gonna lie,
perfect
I'm tapped. I think
What is
that's
the
sexy
purpose?
still.
What is the purpose of quadratic and simultaneous equations?
What is the purpose?
Fucking hell,
What
you
is
man are
the-
tapped,
What
bro.
is the purpose of them?
Man failed maths, on purpose. I got excluded in school, innit? Secondary
What is the
school.
purpose of them?
I'll be honest, when it comes to the maths curriculum,
Or set theory.
Not the purpose of teaching
you
them.
set free?
Not the
No.
purpose of teaching them. What is the purpose of them itself?
and again, this is a very humble Laurena. It speaks of motion, quadratics. But I'm going to reverse this and say that when it comes to the maths curriculum, there's a lot of which I'm not sure what the purpose is of, right? If you ask me about geometry, I will be able to explain some of it. But a lot of the maths curriculum is something that I can't always say, this is why we use it in this world, because it is
So
occasionally very...
Do we even use it in this world?
You do, depending on what career you're in,
Like
and
what
industry,
career, what
right?
industry would you use that in?
Probably NASA or the sciences, those sort of outlandish
Understood.
sorts of, yeah.
So I'm glad. So I had that burning question because I got a C in maths and I hated quadratic.
So did
I hated quadratic equations. I hated
Scraped an A.
simultaneous equations. I hate that script. Good for you. They still got A is an A.
It was my only
Listen,
A.
she's smart. She's the smartest person I've ever met. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, she wants. I'm just saying that because I got to big up your thing. You get me? Because your thing's mad,
No,
It's mad because you're a proper, very astute person. So I want to hear more about. Because the thing is about this conversation. I get too deep because I'm so passionate about this thing. I was in it for 11 years.
I heard that.
Christianity.
And it's all Christianity. It was my life. Like I wanted to be a professor, an academic scholar, but now I just want making money because I left that life and I was like, I invested so much into it. So, but what I do appreciate is hearing the perspectives of people who are still in that world, and even people that disagree with me as well. Like we agree, but like I like to hear people that disagree with me because I want to learn from you. So, tell me more about why you still believe, because you said you went through some doubts. Why do you still hold on to this? And what's keeping you believing in Jesus?
I think when it comes to an explanation that you can chase after riches, you can be successful, and yet it's the only sort of source of hope beyond a lot of this world's problems, right? It emphasizes heaven, it emphasizes eternity, it emphasizes a lot of which is antithesis to the way we behave towards each other, right? And so whilst it doesn't speak to us having to be impoverished, it is clear that we are to seek eternal treasures. And so I think in reality, I think a lot of us are living a life that it reflects a sort of short-sighted, present-day, here and now enjoyment, but it often leaves you empty and desolate and without hope.
And that's something that I do appreciate. I want to say this because it's important. I still do take things from all religions that I think are applicable as a human being. I think that all religions at the core of them are saying similar things, that it's all about being a good person, being good to your neighbor, and if you do bad, there's bad consequences. If you do good, there's good consequences. No matter how, they've all got different ways of articulating that, what those things are. But for me, I respect religion at the core of it's about being a better person. Where I think religion goes wrong is people take it to be this absolutist method. This is the only way of how you are to live as human. This is the guide, because human beings are flawed, and my reasons for leaving the Bible or leaving Christianity is because I saw so many errors. So now I'm at a place where I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna live my life according to what I think makes sense in light of my experience, because all I have is me, my reason. I don't have anything else objective. So what do you think about that? Do you think that it's a reasonable thing? Do you think I'm going to hell?
No, I don't think. Do you know what?
In your world,
So I believe if you do not trust in the finished work of Christ,
I don't.
Right. And so I was gonna say
I don't. I'm saying
And
really.
so-
I don't
and
believe
so-
I don't believe my man may even resurrected, but not in a disrespectful way.
Yeah.
But I don't believe
And
he's
so
a thing.
I would say where religion speaks to people being good and trying to be morally upright, that is not the core of the Bible, right? The Christian message says we all fall short,
Yeah,
right?
it does.
And so it kind of offers grace in light of the fact that we're not good. And Christ was the only perfect one. And so I think when it comes to just religion and trying to live morally upright and not being able to have a framework that, you know, ticks every box because it's not purely logical, that wasn't what Christianity was ever presented to be, as a purely logical religion.
Okay. Matt, you have any response to what she said?
I think she's right. I think the same. You wanted the Bible to be coherent and logical, but the same God who created coherent and logic also created love. Mm-hmm. And there are dichotomy. Love and logic don't exist together. Mm. And you have to understand that two things can be true at the same time. The truth could be possibly, and I also could be wrong, is that the Bible is not coherent, is written wrongly, incorrectly by flawed humans, but the message can still be correct.
But okay, let me hold you on to that. And I like that. Yeah. I love it. Okay, so the question is, this is going to be a very interesting question. I want to ask this properly. How could a God that's described as infallible, immutable, so he's incorruptible, he's all-knowing, omniscient, he knows everything that could ever happen, he created the world in the way that it exists, with every event that happens in the way that it does, in the particular, way that it does, how could he then make clear logical statements that can only be tested on a basis of a way that it could either be or? So, for example, like in Proverbs, it says that every word of Yahweh is flawless, and in I think it's First Peter talks about.
Who said that?
Well, the writer of Proverbs, which is assumed to be canonical. So this is the question, because it's all men who write these things, and they decide what books are to be considered from God. So my question is, I'm not looking to go back to what you said. I'm not looking for a perfect logical explanation of everything to know about reality. I'm just saying, if you're going to say that this is the guide, and I'm living a life in a way where I can because we can only know truth through logic. And I know that sounds mad, but because I don't think logic is.
But logic is flawed as well.
It is flawed.
Because logic is only in the context and knows of what you understand.
But there are basic principles that I think are reflective of our reality in the way that we think.
But okay, fair enough. But then God's reality is different to our reality. So then, therefore, the logic and laws that we abide by is not the same thing as his.
So how can he hold us accountable to things that don't make sense in the way that he's made us to use a faculty to test things on that basis? Because
how can he hold us accountable?
Yeah, because
who said he does?
Well, the Bible does. That's what I'm saying. If you don't believe in Jesus Christ's finished work, like she said, you're going to hell. And so for me, it's like,
but
I don't have a criteria. So
the Bible says,
we established the Bible's flawed.
Okay,
we established the Bible's flawed.
No, but you said, what if it could be true?
The message could be true.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think that is reflective of all religions. Because I think the message of the Bible is what all religions are trying to say, that... Because I'm not an atheist. I believe there's a God. I just don't think it's the Abrahamic God. Because I think the Abrahamic view of God, Judaism, Christianity and Islam, are based on a human construction.
Yeah, human projection.
But whereas, like, I like the more Eastern spiritual religion. Because I think
they're flawed too as well.
Of course they are. But I don't believe they're absolutely true.
Logic. So, okay.
I don't think they're absolutely true. But they do reflect a lot of things that we can observe scientifically.
How do you reconcile that a lot of the sort of Eastern religions are not logical? Right.
Well, give me an example.
So I'm thinking about reincarnation. That's not something that's a purely logical, something that's logically explained, and yet you would subscribe to that.
I don't subscribe to it. Oh. I don't believe reincarnation is absolutely true. I infer that it could be true because it makes sense to me, but I'm not dogmatic to say this is how it is. Okay. Whereas when I was a Christian, Jesus is raised from the dead. If you're not going to believe in that, bro, you're going to hell. That's the difference. This is like, I admit that I have beliefs that can't be proven.
No, I'm not even talking about that. Like,
sorry. So you have beliefs that can't be proven
because they're just merely belief. They're subjective to me and what I think. But I'm not going to say, like, in a way that I say 2 + 2 is 4. It's not how I would say I believe that Hinduism or.
Let me ask you a question then.
Yeah, I love this. I love this shit.
Let me ask you a question. Would you say God has ever spoken to you?
I don't know.
No. Would you say, not my opinion or your or her opinion, would you say God has spoken to you at any time in your life?
What do you mean?
Oh, no,
That's a very.
No, it's not. No, it's not. It's a very.
Do you know why I say that?
Question.
Because I believe, that it's possible that God could have used people to speak to me.
No. I'm just saying.
Okay, then no.
Would you say God has not spoken to you at any single point?
God himself, God as what I think God is, no.
What you think God is, God has not spoken to you.
No.
I would say, if I ask that question, I would say, at certain periods of time in my life, God has spoken to me.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Tell me.
At certain periods of time in my life, I would say that.
Yeah.
So therefore, I would, whether it's you call it my conscious or subconscious or something deeper, or something deeper than that, has called to me and said, gave me advice. I said, I should do this, I should do that way. Turn left, not to turn left, don't turn right. It's like, so those things has happened.
Yeah.
So, for me to completely discard the idea of God is impossible.
I don't discard that
But
idea.
The idea, you're saying that, but everything you are saying is what other people have said of God. So, therefore, your issue is with the people and not with the message.
Well, my issue is with the Christian message because there's certain things about the Bible that I don't subscribe to morally.
Yeah,
with the Old Testament, the genocides, or for example, God mandating slavery in Leviticus and Deuteronomy. Like where God says that there's classifications of laws for how Israelites are to rule over Israelites as slaves. And there's more extreme laws for how Israelites are to rule over foreigners. That you can beat a slave to the point of death. If he doesn't die, he has to return back to you because he's your property. And for me, that's analogous to the translate. Well, whoever the authors believe, they believe it was Moses in Leviticus. So I'm just simply.
So you're disagreeing with the writers. You're disagreeing.
Yeah.
You're disagreeing with the writers.
And where did they get their message from? Because they clearly were influenced by their culture, and that's what I'm trying to get at. That I believe there's a God. I just think God is energy.
You think God is energy?
I think God is energy because I think energy is eternal. Even when you think about the first law of thermodynamics.
Of course, in that theory, God is energy because we're just energy as well.
And so that's why I believe that He's the purest. Whatever God is, I don't think this what like you. I don't think this thing is an accident. I don't think we're here for no reason. Like, even us having this conversation, I think there's something going on, but I just don't think it's what we think it is.
Of course, and that's not. But we're not supposed to know what. Like, if we believe in God, and He's all knowing and all seeing all these things, and we're just got one microscopic scope of one vision, therefore, like, we're not supposed to know. There's certain things we're not supposed to know. There's certain details we're not supposed to be aware of. We don't have enough vision to see what He's supposed to see.
Yeah, I agree. I hear where you're coming from with that. I want to give her a chance to, because I don't want to.
Repeat that last thing.
I love hearing you guys. To be honest, I like you guys talking more than I do because I like hearing what you guys. I'm learning from. So
like, what I just basically said is like, we as human beings, we got this really skewed scope of the world. It's like looking through a telescope. Just this is the scope we have, but the wider scope we have, what God has is so much wider than that. Yeah. A lot of the times, we find issue with the small scope that we get. When it's remotely possible that God has a bigger scope, and He's looking at that, and we're supposed to be just focused on this because that is what He wants us to do. And I think that a lot of famous issues is with the people who focus on this rather than this. And I'm a big I think that I'm happy looking at this because I understand that this is going to take care of itself. So my job is to focus on this part.
That's deep. Oh my God, that's deep. You know, I hear that still.
So that's why I believe there's a God. I don't necessarily believe in the Bible. I believe in the message of it, but I'm quick to not put my whole faith into one thing because I know it's flawed.
That's basically what I'm trying to say.
But at the same time as well, you don't give the same level of shit test to the other things you believe, which is very interesting.
But I do though. And so for example, the other things I believe, let me explain what I believe. I believe I don't know. I believe there's a God. I hope there's a God, but I don't know. Only because I've only been around for how many years? Yeah. This universe has been around for, they're saying now it's 27 billion years. How they know, I don't know. But originally it was 13.7 billion years. Multiple ways of testing. Put all that aside. My thing is this. Outside of who I am and how I exist as Fems, how can I possibly know for sure what is the truth? Unless it interacts with me. And what I'm saying is there's so many perspectives that humans have created throughout human civilization that all contradict each other. A lot of them cross over. And it seems that a lot of the basic principles of what religion is saying, like Sikhism, Hinduism's older than Christianity, older than Judaism. It was talking about being a good person and how moral and practical it is, and how beneficial it is to be a practical good person. So what I'm trying to say is, what I thought I believed to be the ultimate truth for life, I no longer do because I found errors of the criteria, which is the Bible. Like, I don't think that the 4 gospel writers were actual eyewitnesses because they were written decades after the life of Christ. But my thing is this, yeah, is put that aside. I'm open that there's a being or something, and I want there to be something. I don't want, like, the idea of life. Like, I flirted with atheism for a while, and I thought, no, that shit's too depressing. You get me? Because atheism is a mad thing, you know. It's a mad thing because it's like shout out to the man out atheist because you got a heart. It's still like to believe that your thing's you in this life, and whatever happens, do you know what I'm saying?
It's over.
It's over. And you just cease to exist. But my thing is like, I'm spiritual because of my psychedelic experiences, which I actually have experienced, and they've made and what I experienced in that trip. People who have done psychedelics will know what I mean. It's something that you cannot replicate in any other part of life, and that doesn't mean that your interpretation of it is true. But what it does mean is that it's an experience that is true to you, and I never had that with Christianity, which is why I'm not a Christian. But I do respect your thing. That's what I'm trying to say.
I would agree with what you said before, just about.
Oh, of course you're gonna agree. Oh, all right. Okay.
I was trying to answer all parts.
She don't like me, you know.
No, because I didn't actually.
I don't like you either. You're up, you know.
I was literally chewing on the idea of the fact that, you know, we are just a drop, right? The idea of us being finite in our understanding.
Yeah, I agree with that as well, though. I agree with that as well, though. What's the problem?
Let me respond to the fact that I was chewing on what he said.
She's racist, you know.
Wow.
She don't like Nigerians.
Wow. No.
You lot are Caribbean. Yeah, I see the link up still. No, sorry. I don't want to cut you off.
Just the idea of us being finite and, again, God. Part of his attributes is the fact that he is the one who's all-knowing, and so there's a lot of questions that we have based on a dot that we see in light of an ocean that he made, right?
Yeah.
And so I was agreeing with that. Saying that, I don't think it renders us with, like, we are not without excuse just because we only we're not blameless, right? We still have a pursuit, and we still have to sort of...
we're 100% accountable.
You know,
yeah. 100%.
We are held accountable to pursue an understanding of God, and to, you know, as a Christian, to reconcile a lot of you know, the issue with sin, right? Which is the core message of Christianity. I think when it comes to... I think what I'm struggling with is... I know you were speaking to the concept of logic, right? And not being able to approach things without it being logical. And yet you are comfortable to accept things that are not logical based on the fact that you experience.
Because I put them in a category of subjectivity. Whereas before, as a Christian, I put that on the stand of objectivity. So when it was criticised, the criteria that was being criticised, I couldn't defend it objectively in the way I can with other things. Whereas now, as a skeptic, I'm saying I'm no longer Christian, I'm open-minded, but I have beliefs. I'm human, but I am acknowledging that those beliefs cannot be proven as facts. I'm not saying that psychedelics prove that there's spirituality and that's fact. I'm just saying that's what I think because I've experienced mushrooms. and people might laugh and be like, oh, you're just a nut, but no, like unless you've done it yourself and you've done a scientific medical, there's a lot of scientific experts who have PhDs that have actually said no, do mushrooms. So what I'm saying is not based on just like a mad thing, but what I'm saying as well is don't take what I'm saying as fact either, because I've come from the Christian thing. Man no longer believes that because I've done a lot of extensive research, but that doesn't mean that follow what I'm saying and what I believe now is fact. No, my mindset of what I believe is true and false, it has changed because I've left religion. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so your walk away was because it was illogical, but then your walk into whatever else you've accepted is because it's experiential.
Experiential, but I put in a category of this is just what I believe, and I'm not saying it's 100% true. I could be wrong. Whereas before, as a Christian, the Bible doesn't give you the option to say it could be wrong. You have to believe it's true because the Bible says, yeah. Well, obviously, I was a proper. I was a guy who believed that everything in the Bible was true. You got to take it for what it is. So I believe that.
Really? You was that guy?
Yeah, I was that guy. Yeah, and the thing is, in the circles that we come from, a lot of us are. So we're actually the minority in the whole.
What dominant denomination is that?
A Protestant, so like Reformed or Baptist. I don't want to get too, because that's too deep for these man. You get me? These man don't. They're like they ain't trying to hear all this thing. But it's a very. We'll talk about it off camera innit? More, but it's more. It goes back to like the Reformation in the 16th century, where the Catholics and the Protestants, Martin Luther, he tried to go against the Catholic Church's view of justification, and then boom, the Protestant Church happened with the 95 Theses, innit? Yeah. So. Yeah, I basically come from a branch of Christianity that is very westernized, very anglicized, and very much indicative of what happened in the 16th century in the breakaway from Catholicism. Yeah, and specifically on how Jesus saves us. So I basically said everything that the Bible says is true. But at the time, I never questioned it.
Did your denomination believe in the rapture?
Yes and no. I say yes and no. Not in a way that... it's mad because this is going to open up another can of worms, isn't it? Because you know what I'm talking about. But a certain school of people would believe that Jesus... That they have... Different schools have different views on when... of the timing as to when Jesus is going to return and what's going to happen. Yeah. So I believe that when he comes, the whole world ends. There's no people getting taken up secretly, all that bullshit. It was more, no, when Jesus come down, it's a mad thing. Everyone's gone. That's what a man believed in it. But now, now I just believe that I don't even believe that Jesus even believed what his followers believe he is, because it's all, when I look at it from a purely historical, because people say, because you lot are saying logical, I'm looking from a historical perspective as well. That I can't believe that the accounts of Jesus, which are based on Matthew, Mark, and Luke and John, the only sources we have of him, by the way, are historically true, because they have contradictions about historical narratives about him, where two men are talking about the same story about my man, but they contradict each other. So on that basis, I can't even trust that you're historically valid. And people might look at me and think I'm crazy, but I'm just going to say, yeah, this is what I think. I'm just being real. You get me? So...
But they're historically not valid. You proved that already. So when you found out they were historically not valid, because Matthew, Mark, Luke, John were written from second-hand and third-hand experiences, like that. So that by itself, okay, you know it's not historically valid because you're getting from second part information. Damn.
You got cut out, you know. That can't be in there, you know. Say that again.
So Matthew, Mark, Luke, John was written on a second or third hand, like third-hand information. So you understand that.
Yeah.
But that means you know it's going to be flawed. You know it's not going to be historical. It's not going to be accurate.
Yeah.
But even knowing that, you still want to hold it to such a high level of esteem, and you still want to believe it in every single word, every single line. When rather you can just literally say, I'm going to believe 40% of this, and 60% I'm just going to say it's just an anthology of words, and I'm just going to listen to the message you're trying to teach me.
Because I don't think that the message of Jesus allows that option. Jesus said things like, if you eat of my body and drink of my flesh... Oh, sorry. If you eat of my flesh and drink of my blood, you have eternal life. If you don't do that, you'll perish. So the implication of what he's saying is, you believe in me or you don't. Mm-hmm. there are drastic consequences. So for me, I don't think Jesus allows the message of the gospel or the Bible doesn't allow a middle ground. I think people can interpret that way because I only believe it's a human book. So of course you can interpret the way you're saying. Of course I agree with you, but in the way that what I think the message is trying to portray by the people who wrote the book, what her conclusion is true. If what she's saying is true, I think that actually matches what these men were writing about, that if you don't believe in this, there's implications that are so severe that your eternal destiny is at stake. And I can't believe in that anymore because I think, well, the criteria is plagued in ways that other mythical human constructed books are. So why don't I believe in Zeus or Osiris, which was 3,000 years before the Old Testament? You get me? Yeah. Why don't I believe in Horus or Osiris or Dionysus or you know what I'm saying?
Ares, god of war.
Yeah, yeah. Why don't I believe in that? Because they came before, so why are they wrong? Why? And that's what I told Christians. Why is all these Jewish, Near Eastern cults or religions, why are they all wrong? Because they contradict what the Bible says. But the Bible also contradicts what other religions say.
The Bible speaks of other religions, right? It's clear on idols. It's clear on an understanding of people groups worshipping other gods, right? You get a picture even before Israel and Babylon of various groups worshipping Asherahs and Baals and whatnot. And yet, as a Christian, it's the idea of sin and reconciliation with God. I have yet to, and again, I know other people who have explored other faiths like you, have been on a journey where they have looked into the Quran and looked into Eastern religions and sought to reconcile that understanding of faith that way, right, comparatively. And yet there's just a glaring understanding of an inability to be made right. Clear from the Ten Commandments, clear from conscious beings who every day swear and are immoral and constantly sort of, you know, demonstrate in actions and behaviour that they fall short, that only an understanding of grace and Christ can reconcile, right? The concept of propitiation, right? Having a substitute on our behalf that is perfect where we are imperfect. I think I couldn't speak on every other religion and its intricacies, and yet I understand and know and believe that it's only in Christianity where it doesn't have to be so confounded. It doesn't have to be so heavy, right? It doesn't have to be so burdensome in trying to be okay and right before God. That would be sort of my thoughts. I think there's a lot of Eastern religions that have sort of taken on popularity because it is so freeing and it doesn't sort of hold you account, and it doesn't it doesn't change you. It allows you to do whatever you want, and yet there's chaos in that. There's chaos in complete sort of freedom without having to sort of think about judgment or
but don't you find Christianity too controlling then?
No.
Okay, that's a bit too personal. Do you think Christianity that's also a fact. Christianity has been used as a means of control in historical perspectives.
It has. I wouldn't disagree.
Yeah.
It's done more bad than good in history.
No, that's we can't equate that because we have to put quantitative measures to good. But the reason why I was asking the question is, on one hand, you're saying that people are using gentrified Eastern religions as a form of being freedom, using freedom. But on the other side, you have Christian religions, Christian denominations, which are way too controlling. For example, I was raised as a Seventh-day Adventist, so on like just much like the Jews, I couldn't do anything from the Friday night, from sunset on the Friday to the Saturday sunset as well. I couldn't play basketball, couldn't watch TV, I couldn't like do any of those things. So what was my kind of like interesting spot is that when I was playing basketball, I wasn't allowed to go to games, even though I was really, really good. So from Friday I couldn't play basketball, couldn't touch a basketball, and then when the games are over, then I can maybe go to practice afterwards, or I could go watch the game or something. I could never be part of it. But it was so controlling that I literally had to sneak out from church and then go play basketball and then return back afterwards. So that influences life chances, life destinations, destinies, wherever it is. And you're in a sense, you're controlling the kid. When basketball's not evil, it's not good, but you're putting it in a direct confrontation with religion because it's a rule. So on one hand, you are destroying a child's faith and growth in the mean to appease a religion what doesn't really care about it. So, but on the other hand, you have gentrified each religions where you can do whatever you want and have the freedom to go there, do that, any other choice. I think a good helpful balance is somewhere in the middle, where it's not too controlling, where you don't impact a child's or a person's life and restrain them, but know that you're still accountable for yourself. You still have freedom. But you are not so restricted that you have to obey these rules and laws every single time, every single day of the week. And too much freedom is bad for you because you are not in a state where you are accountable for your decision making because your decision making skills have been poor and they're kind of restricted that way. I think there's a massive, we can't looking at one side, look at the opposite side of the coin as bad and not being self-reflective of your own side of the coin as seeing the bad part of it, I think is not, I wouldn't say counterproductive, but almost and this is maybe too strong of a word, but almost like a shred of arrogance.
This is supplying the mind. You can go as deep as you want.
In a shred of arrogance, because we are too concerned with what other people are doing and not really concerned with what we are doing ourselves in the scope of our religion.
What do you think about that?
So are you sort of speaking to the fact that we often look outward as opposed to inward?
Yeah, in terms of we almost put ourselves in an unfallible position because we believe what we're doing is the right thing to do all the time. All our laws and all our reasoning is right, and they must be wrong. When the truth could be that we're 70% right, we're 80% right, we're 30% right, and we are wrong at that time. We're not ready.
That's interesting.
We don't look at our religions with the shit test that you did in terms of historical perspective is great, but we don't even do that from a moral perspective as well. And I think as religions, we are so concentrated on morality, but we actually don't shit test the morality of our religions.
It's funny you say that because I didn't do that until I left Christianity, where I was like, hold on, there's slavery in the Bible, there's this in the Bible, there's genocide, God wants to kill this nation, that nation, kill their men, kill their sons, take the wives for yourselves. And there's mad things. And it's only after I left, on the basis that I was explaining earlier, the contradictions, false prophecies, and I don't think Jesus is the Messiah because I don't think he fulfilled the Old Testament prophecies about what the Jews expected the Messiah to be from their scriptures, which is why the Jews don't believe in Jesus. Most Jews who identify as Jews. But what he's saying, I get what you're saying, Matt, because but I think everything's a process. I personally think life is what you make of it, man. Like, I just personally think that everyone's on their own journey, and I think something spiritual is going on. But at the same time, I feel like some people are enlightened, some people are not. Some people are deeper than others. Some people look into certain things in a certain way, and I think everyone's finding themselves. And I think if there is a God, and I do think there is a God, I don't have a basis to say that it's factual, but I do think there's a God. Whatever that God exists like, I just think there's something. And I think whatever that thing is, doesn't care about whether or not we're aware about his existence, but we should care about how we live in a particular culture, particular time in history, and you're existing as a person who's living the life you're living. And I think that is the only thing you have that is the most important to you. So I think you might as well gravitate and hold on to that and figure out and go. And I think everyone's on their own thing. That's personally me. And I could be wrong. I could die and there could be a fire-breathing dragon that's waiting for me on the other side. But my thing is, until I see that thing... Thrones. Yeah, literally. But my thing is, until I see that thing, I'm ready. You get me? Man's ready because I can only know what is around me. And I don't think it's reasonable to be judged on something I do not have knowledge about. Because I just want to believe that whatever God created me, there is a God that created me, is way more smarter than me. And his reasoning is or she's reasoning is beyond my, you know what I'm saying? So that's why I'm like, man, I can be content in just not knowing the answers and just doing what I can.
That's literally what I think anyway. Like, I'm content with not knowing.
Yeah, I prefer not knowing.
I wouldn't say prefer. I wouldn't say you go that far. I say I prefer not knowing. I just know I'm limited in my intellect. I'm limited in the vision that I have of the world. Like, I'm limited, so my understanding of things are going to be limited. So therefore, I can only take care of my actions, my accountability to myself, and my decisions.
Yeah.
And the decisions I don't make and do make, and try cultivate a life which is fulfilling to the morals that have been prescribed to me. That's it. And I think that if I do that, and I think if God is a fair God, he will judge me fairly on that. I would also think is that if our God is full of love as that we claim him to be, he has a very, very big understanding that a lot of decisions what are responsible for our life are decisions we didn't make.
And that's what I kind of want to say is that I don't want to get too deep and too technical in my arguments, but because I come from that experience in that world where I'm so deep in it, that's all I know in terms of judging it. Only because, like, I've gone on to do so much more research. My reasons why I don't believe are even more heightened because of the research I've done since leaving Christianity. It's not like I've just said, okay, fuck it, I'm gonna just fuck around now. No, I still listen to scholars, Bart Ehrman, bare different guys that, you know, when I left, what I do want to say is show the practical, like, implications out of my life, which is when I left Christian, when I said to myself, okay, I'm not believing in this thing anymore, it hurt me, you know, because 10 years, 11 years, man was invested in this. Also, I spent a lot of money with scholarships and financial aid to go and study in America to do this thing on another level. And for me, it's like, when I renounced my faith, it was very psychologically unnerving. It was very like, wow. Like,
yeah, because it took over one of your foundations of your life, your core belief systems.
Basically, yeah.
I can definitely hear that in the way, the level you shit test and the level of how you analyze Christianity, because you're so heavily invested in it.
Yeah, basically,
and it's almost like one of your core belief systems, your core foundations have been ripped away, and now you're not going to let anybody or anything fool you again like that ever again.
So that's, you hear his thing. So I think that's my thing.
So that's why
man articulating.
So that's what I definitely hear from you.
I think there's two sides. I think
what are those two sides? I want to hear it.
There is a degree to which you have to sort of accept a limited intellect, right? And to some extent, maybe there is a sort of throw your hands up sort of white towel. But then the Bible says, our people die for a lack of knowledge. And so there's a pursuit that should happen, right? Yeah, especially if the Bible's true and there's eternal consequences, there is a pursuit to understand and know and believe and reconcile certain things that should take place. So you do not have to experience judgment. You don't have to experience hell, and you get to experience the forgiveness of God. And so I think there's a complacency that has eternal consequences as far as pursuing understanding in Christ and faith. And so I think, there's two sides to that coin. We're not going to know everything. We are limited. Some things are beyond us, and yet if we don't pursue an understanding of certain things, there's gonna be eternal consequences.
And I hear that, and I think for me, I respect everything you guys have said, and I love it because I've learned a lot from you guys. Even in this conversation, I've learned more than you think. But if I'm just being real, where I'm now, I'm more happier mentally, spiritually than when I was a Christian, because I think my identity of who I am, in terms of my ancestry, my heritage, the spirituality of what my ancestors believed, my culture, has been more, that's something I'm searching for more now than when I was a Christian. I was more trying to fit in the Protestant, Europeanized.
More anchored into that.
Yeah. The anglicized version of Christianity was something that the reform, the reform world, they're all white men with blonde hair with suits, Dutch. You know what I'm saying? Like, you get me? So it's like, and as a black man, I don't fit in that. And I know, and this is not, I don't think it's restricted to your beliefs. I'm not saying, what I'm saying now is not a reason for why Christianity is right or wrong. I'm just talking about where I am now, spiritually. I'm more into believing in what my ancestors actually believed. And people might look at me like, oh, well, but let me tell you something, like I believe in spirituality. And the definition of spirituality for me is a reality that transcends the physical, but it's very much just as real as the physical, but it's invisible. And why do I believe that? Because of science, physics. Because there's certain doors that physics and science leave closed or unanswered because on the other side there's something that we can't access. And the fact that we like, even our conception of dimensions, our conception of it's so mad that, like, there's so many things about physics that make me think, no, there's definitely something. Like, even the fact of even the Big Bang, the state of the universe went from one state to another, a transformation. That's what the Big Bang really is. People think it's an explosion, but it's not. How did that happen? So for me, it's like, no, I'm not saying that there's no God or no cause. I'm just saying that what human beings have articulated as this is the explanation for reality, I'm questioning as flawed because next man said it 2,000 years ago, and I can't interview Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, or Mary and Magdalene and them man there. I can't talk to the 500 witnesses Paul was talking about because I don't know them. So I'm saying, if I apply that logic to the courtroom setting, and the judge says, you know what, this guy has done bare crimes, there's so much investigation, evidence that's been brought forward, my man's guilty for the murder, but you know what, I think he's telling the truth because bare man have told me that he was innocent. We're not going to accept that. You wouldn't rate a judge that accepts that. So I'm saying that on a basis, when I say logic, I'm talking about reality. I'm not talking about Einstein.
But not many things can live up to the courtroom test.
But from a historical perspective, it has to be.
No, it doesn't. Like, for example, let's just say, like, okay, so 9/11 doesn't stand up to the courtroom test, but yet still believe about it. The Titanic doesn't stand up to the test, to the courtroom test.
Yeah.
Like, even the creation of the atomic bomb doesn't stand up to the courtroom test until it happened. Lots of things don't stand up to the courtroom test until it actually does happen. Or even building the pyramids, we don't understand that. So lots of things what exist in the world don't stand up to the courtroom test at all. So we can't be the only veil of how we analyze things. It can't, because lots of things will fall short. Because let's say look at the pyramids, nobody knows how the pyramids are built, but we know they exist. So therefore, we know they was created, but we just don't know how. So what do we have to believe then? Do we have to believe that they don't exist because we don't know how?
But you know what I say to that though? I love that. I would say all those examples you gave, we can actually prove that they happened. But with God, it's such an obscure thing that where do we start with? What does this God look like? Which God are we talking about? Because there's so many different cultures, religions, philosophies that have articulated their concept of God, but none of them have been provable. So it's like, in a way that when I say provable, I mean in the sense of what you've described about the things you just talked about, because we can prove all those things. We can prove 9/11 happened. We can prove all the other things, but they are pyramids. We can observe them, but But with God, where do we start from? So my criteria with the Bible is, okay, you're bringing this sacred text as a guide for life and humanity. I'm saying why we shouldn't trust it as the guide for humanity, because of the principles that you, not you or you, but any Christian is coming with. So I'm saying on that basis, I can't go with it. But I'm open because I don't know either, 100%. That's what I'm saying. What do you guys think? I love this shit, you know.
I can tell you love this shit. This topic is definitely your topic, man.
Yeah.
It's like,
I want it to be your topics too.
yeah. I got to do a whole heap of reading for it to be like on that same level.
No, same, bro. I still read, bro. There's so much man don't know, you know, that
I haven't read the Bible before from cover to cover.
I don't believe that.
My
My man was quoting the thing like,
I've never read.
You're good.
I've never read that cover to cover, man. That's long.
I had to in Bible school. They made us, man. They gave us a reading list.
They gave us a reading list too. I just didn't read it. I just look at the notes.
It is long. Especially when you get to like Jeremiah and them prophets. It's long. Still, it's long, fam.
That's very long. That's very long to do.
I'm not gonna lie. Now I'm trying to just enjoy life, chop life, enjoy life, because all I have is what's around me, my experience. So I'm just gonna go with that. And if I'm wrong, then I'll say, you know what? This is gonna sound mad and blasphemous to you, but I'll say, well, if the God of the Bible is true, I'll be like, listen, you create me in a way where I am rational. You know everything about me, and like it's a trick on your part, because like, how you gonna tell me you know what I'm saying? How you gonna tell me that I can't go to heaven because I didn't believe in the Jesus where there's so much controversy about him? The sources that were written about him are flawed anyway. So, like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, how can I really be blamed for not believing that there was enough reason to be assured that this Jesus was true? So I want to let you guys.
I want to ask a question. Do you believe good people go to heaven?
I don't think there is a heaven, but I do believe that there's good people that deserve good consequences.
Okay. Yeah. You think
that experienced in this life, or
I don't know if there's another life after, but in this life, yes. And I don't think every good person experiences good consequences, though, because there are some evil people that don't get justice in this world.
I would say the idea of good person is not the basis for salvation.
What is the basis?
it's cold-blooded?
I would say that coming to a right relationship with God and therefore walking in his, walking by the fruit of the Spirit makes you a person that is objectively good, and because you believed in Christ, you go to heaven. But
Isn't that privilege though?
In what way?
Like, so for example,
That's a dirty guy.
you have
Man come with some different.
so Chris, let's look at that. So some kid from Indonesia who's been good all their whole life was never introduced to God, never introduced to real Jesus, was never introduced, but lived a good life because he doesn't know God. But because we are living in a Western society where we have the privilege of knowing the Bible and God, we can chase knowledge in that pursuit, and we have access to it. As we're speaking from a place of privilege, and if that is the only gateway to salvation, that's means that only privileged people can do that because they have the access to that.
Whereas people before Jesus didn't know about him. So when they died, what happened to them? Paul says that, I'm not going to get to it because it's too deep in it. I don't want to be too deep because we've got a lot of shallow people now in the world. It's 2023. People don't like to read. But what do you think about that?
I think faith definitely comes through hearing the word of God and sharing the gospel. I think there are definitely questions that I've had to ask in terms of what happens to the baby who never heard the gospel, or what happens to the indigenous group. And yet the answer from a Christian perspective propels us more to share the gospel so that all people would come to know Christ, as opposed to answers the questions about what happens to those who don't hear. I think the Bible's clear, right, that Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. And so if there are people who don't get to hear that message,
Damn.
There is
Cold-blooded.
They're all
and do you know
fucked.
what? There is I would say there are you
For
know,
lack of better words, you get me?
I think about David's son when he passed away. He was very convicted, and there is a substantial amount of truth that kind of reflects the fact that, you know, he was still promised salvation. He was still promised a heaven, right? And yet I am not in a sort of space to sort of...
Like, I don't expect you to have all the answers. I just want to know you.
No, I don't.
Yeah, I don't expect you to have the answers or even, like, answer. But this is what I'm trying to prove. It's like, not even trying to prove, trying to say, is that we don't
make sense of.
We don't shit test our religions enough. We don't do that enough.
I agree with that.
And our place in the world, but we shit test everything else around us. On the same time, the pastors preaching in the pulpit against LGBT, he should be shit testing our religion, because
How do we know?
How do we know? And we need to be accountable for what our religion thinks and doesn't think.
Yeah.
Because that by that logic, that means 99.9% of all the good people are fucked. By that logic. And if our God is a God of love, love doesn't allow 99.9% of good people to be fucked.
Especially when he predestined and micromanaged every event and every person to their destiny to be the way it is. Because the Bible also says you cannot come to Christ unless God opens your heart. And everyone's naturally born wicked and evil, and they cannot do anything in themselves to come to Christ willingly. So it has to take God's divine sovereign power to open your heart to believe in him. So then if that's the case, then I'm fucked anyway, because I don't believe in him and it's his fault. But they will say, no, but it's your fault, even though he predestined that, but it's still your fault because what you do is your choice. But my choice is based on what God has already pre-planned. So outside of my choice, I can't outride his. So why am I being blamed for it? That whole Adam and Eve thing don't make sense to me.
See, this is why I stay away from religion.
This is why I smoke weed and just stick to fighting, because it's too deep for the masses. You get me?
This is why. It doesn't work in the end.
Yeah. But I want to let you do the closing remarks, because it's not a bully. It's not a ganging up thing.
I'm trying to run away.
No. Wow.
At this point.
No, do you know what? No. I respect everything you said, because we've had this conversation many times, and what you've articulated very well your points. And but I just wanted this conversation to be a conversation where it's not a debate. I've learned more from you guys than I think you've learned from me, and I also want to. This episode for me was very much about sharing why I no longer believe in Christianity and the Bible, because I've got a lot of Christian friends that think my reasons are shallow and that they just. I've had people tell me, you just want to fuck girls, you just want to go partying all the time, you just want to do whatever it is. Whatever sin's holding you away from Christ. I'm like, no, bro. Man sat down and really looked in this thing. I'm telling you, your book is flawed. So I want to give you the chance to kind of just wrap up and, you know, explain why people should be a Christian, or why your view is true according to your perspective.
Firstly, I feel overwhelmed.
Sorry about that.
No. The call to Christ is not a call that is lofty, right? Its claims is simple. Its message is very simple. It's born out of a love for sinful man. I think I've been challenged in this conversation to dig deeper, to study more. Not that all answers will be reconciled, though, you know, as far as the idea of sin is concerned, I understand that logic often pulls people away. But when I think about the fruits of freedom and living according to every and any which way, its pathway is often destruction, and if not in short term, definitely in long term. Again, as a Christian, I'm always going to speak in terms of eternity, right? And where are you going to end up? And just the understanding of a final judgment. But then God in his grace, right? He sent his son, that who believes in him shall not perish and experience everlasting life. in light of the fact that yes, you will fall short. But it's speaking to a generation where short-term pleasure is so appeasing and
Prevalent everywhere.
Logic and intellect can sound so soothing. I just appeal to the grace of it's grace.
For me, I think most people today don't even use logic. People want to use their sensations and feelings and what they've been told by the media and society, which I think compels all of us to act a certain way, to be politically correct in a way that is indicative of the narrative of the society. And I think the Western world is fucked. I think it's a failed society. But my message isn't to say, I think logic. I think the way a lot of religious people see logic is as if it's this evil thing that is so mechanical and it's so cold and it's like you're detached from emotion. No, I think even just crossing the road, you're using logic because you look before you cross. Like, it's so embedded in our psyche as humans. It's how we've evolved. I think it's a biological construct of our essence that you cannot escape. And I think, we use it in every arena of making decisions. And the most important decision, but your eternal destiny, shouldn't be any different. That's just my message. Matt, what do you think? Am I wrong or is she right? Or are we all fucking dumb?
Nah, I just think we're all lost, bro. I think we're all lost.
I agree.
I think we're all lost, and it only revealed to us at the end anyway.
Yeah.
Because, like, I was taught Christians don't have tats, don't have piercings, not allowed to do those things. So I don't have no tats, I don't have no piercings. But I know other Christian groups have tats, have tattoos, have piercings.
Yeah.
So look, Christianity is so convoluted that so many ideas have come together, and so many interpretations have come together to create different denominations. And the only way we're going to find out which one's true, or if they're all true or none of them true, is at the end anyway.
Yeah. So
the best thing we can do is literally just give each other more grace and more love. And yeah, you hold your friends and your family and your circles accountable, but give them more grace and more love. So that's it.
I hear that still. Well, I need to take a leak.
Yeah, and I'm gonna.
So I think we should wrap up.
Go take a leak, bro.
Yeah, man, the yak's got to me now.